Coming up,
Cancer is challenging. We have made remarkable progress in the last 25 years. There's well over a dozen cancers that 10, 15 years ago were an immediate death sentence that are now effectively cured with therapies and or surgery. For many solid tumors, though, ovarian cancer, lung cancer, prostate, once you get to metastatic disease, right now there aren't cures. And so for some cancers, particularly the ones that have a larger incidence, so more patients getting them, there's still a lot of work to be done. And so we and other companies really are not only hyper-focused on that, but have some really interesting ideas that can be utilized to help, as we refer to it, bend the mortality curve to make people live longer and ultimately drive towards those cures.
So very good to see you, Hidden Nation. Welcome to the studio. You got Josh Carey right here. It's your hidden entrepreneur. Hidden Nation, today we're talking about a very important topic as it applies to medical and tumors, really. And to help us along and navigate this complex but make it accessible conversation is the co-founder and CEO of Context Therapeutics. We're joined by Martin Lehr. Martin, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Context Therapeutics, as listed here, you're a biopharmaceutical company. You're focusing on something with tumors. It's extremely advanced and important. Put it into layman's context for us. What are you doing?
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So Context Therapeutics is a publicly traded biotech company on NASDAQ developing a really fascinating class of drugs called T-cell engaging bispecific antibodies. Totally understand that's a mouthful. We call them TCEs for short. But basically, the concept relates to how our immune systems interface with cancer cells. And what we would hope is that our immune systems would be really good at identifying cancer cells and getting rid of them. And theoretically, our immune cells should do that. But as we all unfortunately know, cancer cells are really, really clever and they adapt in many unique ways to promote their own survival.
Hmm.
One of the ways they do that is they cloak themselves from the immune system. They go into stealth mode. And so they can keep growing unchecked without the immune system really interfacing with them. The whole concept of a T cell engager is to force that interaction. Think of T cell engagers as a matchmaker, right? And so what we try to do is to get a particular class of immune cells called T cells to get very close to a cancer cell. And so we with our antibodies force that binding event. Part of our antibody binds to a T cell, an immune cell. The other part binds to a cancer cell. And so we bring them very close together to use a romantic analogy. We try to get them to kiss. And what we do is try to turbocharge that interaction. So we actually not just bring the T cell in, but we activate it. And we do that through a means called CD3 activation. And so this idea of using a patient's immune system has been around for decades. And we've started seeing success over the last 10 to 15 years. The largest commercial success being a drug that Merck developed called Keytruda. The developmental name was pembrolizumab. And that drug last year did about $31 billion in sales. And that really is mainly related to melanoma, lung cancer. And so what we're all trying to do is, how can we broaden out the use case for these drugs? We know they can work. The question is how can you really amp that up? And T-cell engagers are one way to do that.
How did you find this approach? I love the analogy that the cancer cells are in stealth mode and you're finding the path to overcome that. What was the path to really get to this approach?
Yeah, it was following the breadcrumbs, which is an analogy I really like. Um, First, it was Keytruda, and that really opened people's eyes to using the patient's immune system to attack cancer.
Hmm.
That then segued into a cell therapy-based approach called CAR T, which has done wonders in liquid tumors like leukemias and lymphomas. And really, the next frontier were solid tumors. And unfortunately, that next frontier, solid tumors, people really had a heck of a hard time trying to develop these drugs. The first challenge was they would way overactivate the patient's immune system. And so the immune system wouldn't just attack cancer cells, they would attack normal organs in your body. And that obviously is not ideal. And so it took a long time to harness the technology. Almost think about like breaking in a horse. The clinicians had to figure out how to really manage these drugs, how to give the right dose, what sort of other medications you need to make sure that the patient can tolerate the drug. And once they figured out that cocktail, which is actually pretty simple. They give steroids and a pain reliever, an NSAID. And that really worked wonders. And so we started seeing, those breadcrumbs over the last 2 years, a data set here, a data set there, in some really hard to treat cancers like ovarian cancer, prostate, pancreatic. And that kind of data captures people's attention, right? Hard to treat cancer, no cures, and this technology that carries great hope. People started generating good data, which good data for us means shrinking tumors.
Hmm.
And so we started seeing these data sets and realized we wanted to jump in. We don't do in-house research. We're a development company. So we actually acquired three early stage drugs, two that were right on the doorstep of clinical trials, and one that would be in the clinic in about 12 to 18 months. And so now we're really pushing those forward and seeing if we can replicate some of the success that's happened with other companies in our T-cell engager space over the last 1 to 2 years.
What drives you day to day to fight this fight, if you will?
Yeah, there's a family connection here. So breast and ovarian cancer run in my family, both on the maternal and paternal sides, which is interesting, with no clear genetic link.
Really?
So there was something probably from both families, environmental, that led to the very high incidence of breast and ovarian cancer in our family. And my mother's a breast cancer survivor as well. And then a dear friend is also going through the challenge of breast cancer at the moment. So for me, it's always been mission driven. I'd be lying to you if I said that that was early on in my career the number one driver. I think subconsciously it was always there, and that led me to make a variety of career decisions, like starting my career doing research at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. When you're 22, you just think it's a cool job, and it does happen to be the number one cancer center in the world. And I wanted to do research, but you realize as you get older that whether you realized it was an active decision or not, it was clearly imprinted on me that this was sort of a almost predestined career path. So I've always been in oncology. I've started off as a basic researcher, as I lovingly say, studying cancer in mice, specifically cancer genetics, and then went to the venture capital side to invest in predominantly early stage companies, disproportionately oncology companies, at a fund called Osage University Partners, and had a great time there, learned a ton, had some great mentors. But then ultimately, we got increasingly interested in company formation. And so I left the fund to form Context and really pursue my entrepreneurial endeavors.
I love the connection between your family really experiencing this and you basically just saying, "Hey, hang on a moment," and you taking the cape and just flying to the hospital and the research centers and doing what you have to do. What have the conversations with those close to you behind closed doors been?
Yeah, I think um, it relates more to being a reference point for them and answering questions, less to do maybe about my own company, and more to do about cancer in general,
Sure.
what's going on, what the future holds. and then being a conduit for the family and their friends. So usually it's a family friend who runs into a particular issue with themselves or with their family that they need advice or connections, right? Because cancer is a scary journey. It is a very complicated journey, right? Like a lot of biopsies, a lot of scans, a lot of blood tests. And these aren't typically, binary readouts. You're not getting a traffic light where, it's red, yellow, green. You're getting a three-page report with very detailed genetic analysis, lots of acronyms, et cetera. And that is very hard for someone to navigate. And so more than anything, I've been I called a useful helper for people interpreting their diagnostics and basically providing a sounding board as they think about what potential treatment options to evaluate and what their course will hold. So cancer is challenging. It's a long road.
Yeah.
And I think the more resources someone has at their disposal, the better off they are in making sound decisions for themselves or loved ones.
Speaking of challenging, in your role, your position through Context Therapeutics, day to day or even bigger picture, what is the most challenging obstacle that you have to overcome?
Oh, there are many. In a startup, I think there are some uniformal ones, whether you're in biotech
Sure.
or other industries, such as scaling your company, hiring the right people, retaining talent, making sure that you're appropriately capitalized to execute on the vision that you put forth. So those are universal and they never stop. But those are exciting challenges. And then there are biotech specific ones. So we are focused right now on clinical development and execution. So can we take our really promising drugs, identify the right patients, and have a representative patient population, so geographically distributed, ethnicity, race, etc., and then generate really good data and do it in enough patients that the statistics support advancement in future studies, but also give our investors, we are publicly traded, and so give our investors and prospective investors enough data to make sound investment decisions on a go-forward basis. And so that is always daunting because of the operational complexity that one needs to affect to do that. But then also the fact that, data is data, and usually it's pretty binary. And you've been raising, your child, the drug for years, and hope that it is good. And then more recently, unique challenges within the Trump administration. And so as a business operator, for us, stability is key. The FDA is a known player in what we do. We are in a highly regulated industry, particularly in oncology. The FDA is highly well regarded. It has been run by the same people for years, and that all is changing. And so we, like most people, don't love sudden change, especially when you don't know what the future holds. And so I'm coming into it with a very open mind. I hope that the administration comes in and does affect things like artificial intelligence for faster document review, more streamlined regulatory processes, getting our drug from a commercial standpoint to patients faster. Those would all be welcomed changes, but we're not seeing them yet. Right now on the front end, we're just seeing job cuts, which creates uncertainty with regards to how quickly our regulatory documents will be reviewed, approved, and commented on. And so changes in our world happen all the time. Some expected, like the development stages, some unexpected, like cuts to the FDA. But you adapt and move on and try to keep your team motivated and your investors happy throughout.
As co-founder and CEO of Context Therapeutics, what has been your personal biggest success that you sleep well at night and just, revel in?
I think entrepreneurs don't sleep well.
Ah,
So I think in retirement, maybe I'll
I
start
love the
sleeping
truth.
well.
You're like, I could
Yeah,
have a bunch of wins. The wins don't matter. It's always those struggles, those losses, those misses that keep you up.
right. And I think that's been the biggest learning for me. So I don't, we've had many wins, we've had many losses.
Sure.
And the hardest part of an entrepreneur, particularly the role of a CEO, whether you're at a startup or a large company, is being very grounded and stable. And so the high highs you don't react super strongly to, and the low lows you don't, right? And it's always looking towards the next event, the next year, the next 5 years. So for us, absolutely, anytime we get a drug in a patient and there's a favorable outcome, which means their cancer is hopefully non-detectable, and we did that with very few side effects, if any. Those are each individual huge wins for us. Ultimately, the big win will be if we can have enough of those little wins. That means our drug is working and we'll get regulatory approval down the line. That will be ultimately the best win. And then I'll lose sleep because then you got to commercialize the drug. But having a balanced view of the world is probably the hardest part of the job.
The big lesson my father has always taught me is this too shall pass. The highs, the great highs, the great lows, it'll never stay high, it'll never stay low. You just have to get that balance, and that's exactly what you said. And I love how you positioned yourself as a co-founder and CEO in a biotech company, saving lives, literally trying to do the good work with the title of entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how you
Uh,
see yourself.
Yeah, and that was never an intended goal. I never, wrote down in a notebook in fifth grade, I want to be an entrepreneur when I'm older. And I don't think I put that in my notebook when I was 30 years old. But things happen over time. And again, that's probably just subconscious
Mm-hmm.
thoughts bleeding in. For my personality, it fits very well. I like taking risks. I do have, from an emotional standpoint, a very balanced personality, which probably upsets my wife more than anything because the low lows don't really bother me. And so you start thinking, about what skills a CEO and entrepreneur needs and how they relate to your own, and you realize that they start matching up quite nicely. And again, it was the law of unintended consequences. None of this was done by design, but it does suit my personality quite well. I hope my employees feel similarly and colleagues, but certainly that's my take.
What does the next, what does the rest of this year look like for context? What are you
Yeah,
doing?
this is a really exciting execution year for us. So we have built this pipeline of drugs. They're now being actively tested in patients. We want to
Right.
greatly expand the number of patients who are taking our drug in the experimental trials we're doing. And that's already happening at sites across the United States and potentially ex-US. And so for us, it's setting up a data reveal for next year. And so heads down, executing, and then ultimately, if the data is good, that would be a tremendous inflection point for the company that could lead to our next financing or a strategic relationship with a larger pharmaceutical company.
And your outlook for the whole biotech industry, especially in your sector, is optimistic. It's an interesting time on a
Yeah,
lot of different levels, but where's your head in that capacity?
yeah. My career is colored. I always say my first day in venture capital was in March of 2009. So you couldn't pick a worse time to enter. But if you look at the funds who invested in pretty much any asset class between 2009 and 2013, everyone did well by and large. And the reason for that is in '07 and '08, you had a massive consolidation across industries. And so the weaker players, the poorly capitalized players, were removed. Those that were left standing were stronger, both from the investors as well as the operators. And so everyone did better. The strong companies survived. They were able to access capital, and the investors generated really strong returns. I think that's happening or going to happen now. If you look at what some people are predicting. There's a little over 700 publicly traded biotech companies on NASDAQ. The belief is as many as a third of them will effectively go under this year in 2025. And I mean effectively, either formal bankruptcy or they're the walking dead, that they're not shut down, but they have no capital to really operate.
Oh.
That would be historic as far as the speed with which consolidation happens in the industry. Um, and that would be good. That would be good for operators because it signals the strong companies are the ones that are left. And so for investors who have cash on the sidelines, what better time to invest than throughout the year? As you can see, the winners separating from, I hate to use the term losers, but those who are less fortunate. And that is a wonderful and healthy dynamic that does need to happen from time to time to right size an industry.
Does that have anything to do with like my initial when you said that, I said, oh, that's so unfortunate because now those companies can't continue to innovate and bring certain cures and things to the market. Is that backwards, that frame of mind?
I think your heart's in the right place, and certainly I would frame that as such. You never want something terrible to happen to anyone else, right? And that is the operators as the investors of that company. What you don't know is if that company is doing poorly because the drugs just aren't that promising,
Fair.
or
Thank you for reframing it.
or maybe we have so much competition in a particular area, and they're the 15th company to enter that space. Do you really need 15 companies, or do you need three? And so there's a lot of that healthy winnowing of the market that I foresee
Yeah,
happening. And look, it's every industry's bust boom,
I'm sure.
and we're no different. And we had a boom in 2020 and 2021 due to the influx of capital from COVID and retail investors. And now we're going through the painful right sizing process. But again, for those interested, for example, in a particularly attractive investment area, biotech could be very interesting for people as the year progresses. What I always like to remind people is inflation adjusted, the US spends $770 billion on drugs, therapeutic drugs per year. Whether the market is good or bad, we have a certain health level that requires that level of drugs. And so those drugs do go off patent every 20 years. And so the pharma companies either need to develop new drugs or acquire new drugs to make sure that they can keep selling and get to that $770 billion level. And so the ultimate acquirer pool never changes. It's just the amount of companies they can buy that will change over the next year or two. That creates a really healthy dynamic for those who are in a strong position to survive.
Martin, wrap this up for us. You have the ear of your listener. What is the message you have for them as they go about their day to day?
So cancer is challenging. We have made remarkable progress in the last 25 years. There's well over a dozen cancers that 10, 15 years ago were an immediate death sentence that are now effectively cured with therapies and or surgery. For many solid tumors, though, ovarian cancer, lung cancer, prostate, once you get to metastatic disease, right now there aren't cures. And so for some cancers, particularly the ones that have a larger incidence and more patients getting them, there's still a lot of work to be done. And so we and other companies really are not only hyper-focused on that, but have some really interesting ideas that can be utilized to help, as we refer to it, bend the mortality curve to make people live longer and ultimately drive towards those cures. And so I always like to point back, it's been 25 years since the Human Genome Project. That's not a long time. Remarkable period of health advancements during that 25-year period. Just imagine the next 25 years and where we can be as an industry and as a people. So I'm super bullish on the pharmaceutical industry, particularly oncology therapeutics. And I can't wait to see how our drugs do in people and how we may help them.
Fantastic, brilliant, wonderful message. Martin Lehr, co-founder, CEO of Context Therapeutics. Thanks for all that you're doing. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks so much.